So let's begin. Thank you all so much for coming into my first webinar titled Mastering Metering for Better Storytelling in Wildlife Photography. It's a long title, but I'll go into each topic of the title soon. So anyway, okay, all right, let's begin. It's going to be a 1 hour webinar. So if you don't know me, I'm Tin Man Lee. I have been crazy about wildlife photography for the last 7 years. Have been going very seriously on that. And during that 7 years, I have made a lot of mistakes in terms of metering and exposure. I want to share with you what I have learned from a lot of the masters and from books and magazines that I read, forums and everything, and also a lot of the field experience. I went out and I make a lot of mistakes too. So I want to share with you a system that I find that seems to be working for me. So this is what I feel like when I first went into photography. Everybody have all these terms, right? Evaluative metering. Oh, you should use manual. Oh, AV is better. TV is better. Oh, you look at the histogram. ISO +1 exposure compensation, matrix metering, and all these things. And I bet a lot of you guys who are more experienced have encountered those. And a lot of the newer photographers still have no idea what the heck they are facing. Like, it looks like there are only a few buttons, but there are a lot of things to take care of. And before I go into all these techniques and all, I just want to spend a few seconds to talk about what really is the objective of a good exposure. So to me, at least, and a lot of you guys know that I am really into action wildlife photography, birds in flight, animals jumping, running, and walking towards me, kind of stuff. And exposure to me is actually very important, but I actually don't want to think about it during the photo shoot. So I want to find a method to do exposure that I can get ready in the shortest time. And I won't be distracted during the moment when I try to compose my picture or trying to change the focusing point onto the eyes and moving and, all these things, or even running on the snow while trying to catch up with a bobcat, for example. So exposure, you want to get this done in the shortest time. And then the second objective is, you guys should be writing this down now, the two objectives. One, the shortest time, the easiest method, so that you don't get distracted. The second objective is that, what did I write? So you actually want to capture the most information in terms of details of a scene that is in your mind's eye. And I'm quoting Henry Cartier-Bresson now. So it's not about what you see, it's about your feeling of the scene. And you want to capture something in an exposure that can capture all the information that you want. So I'll explain these complicated, crazy topics later, but just bear with me with these two objectives. God, I think I'm going over time now. Now is I to the second slide and 7 minutes. Okay, all right. So when I first started photography, I was so excited. I mean, a lot of you used to. You bought a new camera, you bought a new lens, you went to some new places, and you started to shoot. And I took a lot of pictures. I still remember in the very beginning, I really love white-tailed kites. And I went every single weekend to photograph these white-tailed kites. And I was very lucky to encounter them during the mid-air food exchange. So what I do is I wake up at whatever time on a Saturday, right? Because we need to catch up sleep after a week of work. And then I just drive to, Santa Barbara, and then go there. And then when I see the white-tailed kite, I ran closer to them, and then I shoot, right? And then I capture some of the food exchange, and I was so excited. And then I started to ask you want to share, right? Because you kind of the ego thing, right? You want to show people how good you are, right? So I show a lot of the peoples, and people look at it and it's okay. And then finally I asked some professionals, And then they look at my pictures and I said, you don't need to sugarcoat. You just tell me what you think of my pictures. And they said, you shoot all over the place. And I said, what do you mean you shoot all over the place? I mean, of course we have to shoot all over the place, right, when we go to the wilderness. So it turned out that there's a lot of unspoken rules that is super simple, but we actually didn't know it as a beginner, or even sometimes a more advanced photographer. So I'll talk about that. You shoot all over the place. This is one thing that you have to be very careful, which is you have to always pay attention to where the sun is, and also where the animal or the wildlife or the bird relative to you and the sun. So it's almost a I don't know, a gym class or something. You always have to keep moving your leg and keep moving the perspective so that you control the light in this way, the natural light. So after some years, after I learned about that, oh, gee, I should not shoot all over the place. And then I started to get better, a little better. And then I started to share my pictures and all. And just 2 days ago, I posted this picture at Fred Miranda Forum, and I remember one of the guys left me a message. He said, "I'm sorry if you are here, but no offense, but it's just a very interesting comment, but I want to say it." So he said, "Oh, Tin Man, I saw your pictures. How come they all have a golden glow in it? Is it because of Canon?" And oh, don't worry about it. I mean, I really love that golden glow. And that's when I realized that it is actually a compliment. It is when you realize how to utilize the light, and how to utilize the light has a very close relationship with exposure and metering. So so enough of all this introduction, right? So God, is it okay? Thank God, still going. So first of all, I want to borrow a story from my good friend. I'm not going to tell his name, but he is a photographer that I admire very much. So I met him in Alaska. I joined him in one of the tours, and he told me a story, and I want to share with you just a quick story. So he was leading. So now is what? Now is March. Still, there are northern lights in the Alaskan Arctic. So he usually leads workshops in September or March for Northern Light. So basically, what they do is they will sleep in the daytime, and then they will just get up when the night gets dark, so that they will spend the whole night waiting for the Northern Light. And in September, there may be more wildlife, so then they can still do some wildlife sightseeing in daytime. But in March, which is around this time, right, there isn't really a lot of wild animals. So what they do is they mostly photograph the Northern Lights at night. So he will lead a group of, 5-6 people and do the Northern Lights, and then he will just sleep in the daytime. So what they do, they did it, I think maybe, 50, 60 miles north of Fairbanks, near the Brooks Range, which is, if you don't know where that is, it's just very remote. So no access to any grocery store or whatever. It's just a remote lodge, right? So this particular morning, he was waken up by a participant. The participant said that, "Oh, I want to grab some grocery. Would you mind driving me to 15 miles away? There's a truck gas station or something." So my friend usually when he drives. Whenever he is in the car, he always bring his long lens and camera, right? And so for this particular day, he was just tired, and he said, "I'm not going to bring my long lens. I'm just going to bring my 16 to 35." And then he just throw the camera in the car, and then he started driving with his friend. And then they were, I think 15 miles into the town is still wilderness, right? All ice and snow and some trees in there. All of a sudden, he braked. He braked the car because he saw something, and he opened the window slowly, and he looked on his driver's side window, and within 20 feet away there is a tree, and then there's a tree branch which is eye level to him, and on top of the tree branch there's a wolverine, and there's snow on the snout of the wolverine. And if you are a wildlife photographer, you know that this is a once a lifetime opportunity that will probably never happen again. So my friend saw that and said, "Oh God, I can't believe I didn't bring my long lens," and he was kicking himself and all. But then within a second, he grabbed his camera, right? And then said, "Okay, I'll just get a habitat shot. At least it's a 1635. At 35 is still pretty good. I can still get a nice picture of a wolverine on a tree branch with snow on the snout, right?" So he grabbed the camera, focused on the wolverine, and click. And then he heard dee, 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 dee. And if you guys know what that means, so he was shooting Northern Lights the night before, and he didn't change his setting. So he was fumbling. Oh God, he wanted to turn off the 15 seconds timer. He couldn't find a button. He turned it off. He turned it on, and then he changed the setting to, I don't know, 500 of a second, and doing all this. And then when he looked up again, the wolverine is gone forever. So so this is probably the most painful wildlife story I've ever heard. And even till today, I still joke with him every time when I see him. So what I want to tell you about this story is how important, sorry, I talked for so many minutes just for this important thing, because I want you to clearly remember that if you go to a trip, you should always set your cameras first. So I'll just ask you guys, why don't you guys type in the message box, how many of you have missed an opportunity just because your camera is not ready when you arrive at a spot, or you just pack your camera and you just left, and then you saw an animal encounter and you didn't have the camera there? How many of you have that experience? So okay, many times. Okay. So wow, I'm glad that the delay is not too bad. I was expecting a delay of 30 minutes. Anyways, so one thing about exposure and metering is the pre-trip setting. That is going to be my focus for today as well. And the speed, you need to set it up so that it doesn't affect anything. Like, you should do it almost like you imagine me jumping out of a car, running towards a place that is in a comfortable distance from the animal, but you have to do all this adjustment while you are running. So you don't even have time to think. So in this webinar, I want to train you or share with you something that after you learn about these techniques, next time it becomes just a reflex action for you. You just set it up and go. So now let's get to the meat of this talk. So now imagine you go to a wilderness place, and for this beautiful iPhone picture, this is Denali National Park that I went with my friend Barrett in August. So when you go to a place like this, you see some greens and you see the sky. It's a sunny day, right? The key thing is it's a sunny day. So what like exactly, like you brought your new camera, you brought your lens, and then you go to this place. Should I look for the animal, or what should I do? And there's one thing that you should always do, and this one thing is called the Sunny 16 rule. Oh, hey, Barrett. Okay, so God, I need to be very careful when I speak. So because I don't know who is here. So Sunny 16 rule. If you know what is Sunny 16 rule, can you type in the text box me? Because this is kind of like a legend that nobody has ever remembered it. So if you don't know about Sunny 16 rule, don't worry. It doesn't really matter, because I'm going to tell you how to remember it. So, oh God, you guys are good, actually. I'm surprised. Well, I'm not surprised. Of course, my friends are all very good. So Sunny 16 rule, in a simple way, is just, God, I need to go faster now. What it means is that when you set your aperture at f16, then the shutter speed and the ISO is reciprocal to each other, meaning that if it's f16 100 of a second, then ISO is 100. And if you go for f8, for example, like you just keep this kind of exposure. What it means, oh, sorry, I forgot to mention. So what the meaning is that, the sun is always that far from the earth. And if there is no cloud, the light intensity from the sun should be pretty similar, right? And Sunny 16 rule is kind of this standard in the camera that every time when you go out, if it's a sunny day, probably 2 hours after sunrise or 2 hours before sunset, you go into any place. You just set your camera to f16, 100 of a second, ISO 100, and you click, and the exposure is going to be right? But oh gosh, somebody's not knowing. Oh well, you know, right? But then the Sunny 16 rule is not good for wildlife photography, right? Because who use ISO 100 for wildlife photography or 100 of second? Well, I do use that sometimes because I forgot to look into my shutter speed. But then if you follow this step, and then if you reduce 2 stops in the f-stop, and then you just increase 2 stops in the shutter speed, I apologize to those people who doesn't know what I'm talking about, the stops, but basically it's just a click in the shutter speed. So you click one on the shutter speed to make it faster, and then you click a aperture f-stop to another to reduce it, kind of balancing it out, So anyways, I'm not going to go too much into the detail because this webinar is more practical, right? So all you need to remember is f7.1, 2000 of a second, ISO 400 is the starting point when you go to a place in a sunny day. I used to go into a hiking trail behind where I work to photograph northern harriers and white-tailed kites and all. And sometimes I don't even have time to meter, but I choose f7.1, 2000 of a second, ISO 400, and I nail it every time. So just set it when you park your car and get your camera out, no matter what. So this is the Sunny 16 rule. God, 20 minutes, okay. So I want to quote something. I know one of the king of quotes is here. He has a website with thousands and thousands of good quotes, but I want to say this: the quality of your life is the quality of your communication, by Tony Robbins. So what he said is the quality of your life is the quality of your communication with yourself and with others. And I think the quality of your image is the quality of your communication with your camera. So what I'm going to explain what that means, but I want to show you a picture that I recently took. I want to tell you that I intentionally shoot that underexposed to show you an example of how not using auto exposure, why auto exposure is bad for birds in flight. But anyways, you get the idea. So this picture is underexposed, and in Photoshop and in Lightroom, you can increase the exposure, but you induce a lot of noise into it. And since I'm kind of obsessive, so I can't see any noise in my picture. So I still won't delete this picture, but you guys probably won't see it in my Facebook. So last few slides ago, I showed the picture of Denali to you, which is a color picture, right? But what is one of the most important things about metering and exposure is that you have to see things in grayscale, meaning black and white. So start to try to train yourself. Whenever you see something, you see black and white. It will take you some time, but if you play enough filters in Instagram, you slowly get an idea. So what I mean is, so you look at this picture first. So there are some black portion and the sky and the green grass and some rocks and stuff, right? And I try to explain to you what I mean by communicating with your camera by drawing a simple diagram of that mountain and sky here. So sorry about my bad drawing. So you see this picture, assuming this is actually the mountain and the grass and the sky and all. So the sky is probably a little bit to the white, but not completely white. And then there is some region that is gray color. And then there's some region that is kind of dark and not too dark at all. So one thing you need to do whenever you go to a place is first turn everything into grayscale in your eyes, and then try to find out the area that has a consistent mid-tone, which means gray color in here. So like in the middle of white and black. So here you see that there is a region. Yeah, thank you for the imagination. You should be good. Yeah. So you look into this gray mountain, right? You see the gray color, right? So this is exactly what you need to look for in any trip. So what you do is, God, this is a good drawing too. So assume this is the viewfinder that you see, and you point the focus point right into part of this gray region. And this is exactly the key moment of the intimate communication of you and the camera. Now the camera doesn't know what you want, but all he or she, I think it's a he for my camera because it's too bulky and big and all. But so what you want to communicate with him is actually just one thing. You just need to tell him what he's focused on, what color is he focusing on. So here you tell them that, hey, now I half press the focus button, and this spot is a gray color. And so then the camera, what it will do is we all this sophisticated camera has light meter inside it. So below this rectangular box, you see that this -2, -3, -2, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3 stuff. So when you half press this button on the grayscale, this light meter will move around. Maybe it was -1, maybe it's +1 or something. Your task is to change your shutter speed and ISO and aperture so that you just click, rotate and click and all, so that you go back to 0. So what it means is that now the camera will know that, oh, okay, now what you are pointing is a gray color, which in the camera's language is a 0. So this is all you need. What metering mode? Oh, the metering mode, spot metering. Thank you for telling me that. So you have to use spot metering, and then spot into this this part, and then you have to also thank you, Janet, for that. 2 things. 1, spot metering. 2nd, you have to choose manual exposure, so manual mode. So no more P mode and no more AV and TV. I'll talk about it later. But manual spot metering, focus on a gray spot, and then adjust your camera into this. So when I say that adjust your shutter speed and aperture and ISO, a lot of you guys already know it, but I'm just gonna spend 10 seconds about this. So what do you change in your aperture and shutter speed and ISO really depends on what you want to shoot. If you are going to shoot a fast flying bird, then you may need 1600 of a second. So when you have a exposure, when you do the spot metering on the gray, and if it's minus, you don't want to change the shutter speed to a slower speed. Then you want to decrease the F number, meaning increase the aperture, and if not, then you increase the ISO. But how high can your ISO go also depends on the camera. So Nikon, for example, Nikon D810, super powerful camera that can have very high ISO without noise. And Canon 1DX Mark II, I have to say it, is very good. You can go up to, I don't know, ISO 4000, and you still don't really see any noise, which is crazy. And so that's why we spend so much money on the camera. So now we can all justify, right? And it's all because of that, all because we can do super high ISO without noise. And so anyway, so aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, I mentioned more in my cheat sheet. So for those who arrive late, please make sure that you stay till the end, because there will be a cheat sheet that I'm going to give you for free. So so that you will learn everything that I teach. So real life example. So this is Pacific Northwest that I just went to. I got some questions. I'll try to get to your answer soon, but I remember what you asked. So you go to this place, right? And you see this grass and sky and trees and all, and I also catch my lens. and this is my shadow. And I'm not trying to have fun by saying that this is my shadow, because shadow is very important. So when you go into a field, okay, oops, somebody is telling secrets now. So so when you go into a place, always look for your shadow, because your shadow is your friend. The mid-tone is your friend. So know your friends. So what it means is that you see your shadow, and then you look at your head, and then you see where this thin body, which is distorted, of course, in here, is pointing at. And that's where the place you want to photograph any birds and wildlife, because any birds and wildlife that show up around this area where you are pointing at will have light shining almost directly onto them, and then there will not be any harsh shadow. So some will say that without shadow, you don't see any depth and it doesn't look 3D. So what you do, which is what Charles Glassard always say, is to step maybe 3 degrees to 5 degrees away from where the sun is directly behind you. Then you create a little bit of shadow, but not too much. And it also depends on the time of the day. But these details, I don't go over it. It's in my cheat sheet. Yes. Oh, somebody's. Oh, okay. Okay. I got to focus. I only have half an hour left. So shadow, mid-tone. So right here, what is the mid-tone? So I already turned my eyes into the grayscale machine. So what you see here, I can tell you that you don't focus on the sky. You don't focus on any dark area. You always look for some grass that is mid-tone here. So so here, usually what I do is I just focus on a patch of, because you never know how big the spot is for the spot metering. So you want to kind of find a place that has more consistency in the intensity of the grayscale, and you focus on it, and then you adjust it so that it's 0. So what that means is, I haven't mentioned about it. So when you tell your camera, okay, this spot is gray and you should expose it in as 0, then everything will fall into place. The white will go into the +2 and 1/3, and then the dark in the dark region. So when you set it as manual, because the reason we set it as manual is because when it is a sunny day. So now is a scenario for the sunny day still. For a sunny day, the sun's light is pretty consistent. It may drop a little bit near the sunset or near sunrise time, but it doesn't really change much. So you want to use manual so that the camera, once it finds the exposure, you just fixate on it, and then you will never change, no matter where the bird is flying, changing the background and all, because it's the same amount of light that is shining on the bird, right? So you set manual, and then you expose the mid-tone, and then you look at your shadow to point. So I went to a lot of trips actually, and I was surprised that a lot of people actually don't look at the shadow, and they just shoot all over the place, and which is like me, but I'm very polite and I don't want to affect them. Maybe they are doing some creative stuff, but usually when you are too much away from this, from where your shadow is pointing, the picture is not gonna look good unless you want to do completely sideways to create some scary moment and those which is more on the emotion part. But anyways, so now we mentioned about those 2 things that you have to do for your camera. One is always set the highlight alert, what we call the blinkies on. So what that means is when you take any pictures, if certain part of the image is overexposed, it will blink. So it's almost like your finger touch some hot iron skillet. It's ow! Like, then you know that your camera, some of the spot is too hot, and you want to reduce the exposure. So always have that highlight alert on, because in the heat of action, when you take pictures, you sometimes forgot everything. And at least because the reason that you don't want all these blinkies is because when it is too bright, once the bright region becomes completely white, then it's all 255 in the intensity, and you lost all the details, right? All the contrast and all. And you don't want certain important part, like if an animal has some white highlight in their fur, you want to see all these details, right? You don't want to lose them. So you don't want to overexpose the picture. So this is one thing, highlight alert. The second thing is histogram display, RGB. So you always want to display your red, green, and blue histogram. One time, I think Charles even joked on me about that. I would, instead of printing a picture, I would want to print a beautiful histogram because it's very satisfying if you nail the exposure of a picture. So when you look at the LCD of the camera, you don't want to look at the picture only. You also want to look at the RGB histogram. You don't want to look at the intensity histogram too, because the intensity is actually just a ratio of the red, green, and blue. And sometimes if the red channel is way over, but then because of the average of all these three, not the average, but I think it's, 50% green, and then 25% red and 10% blue is how the formula of combining into grayscale. But so intensity, sometimes you may have all the blinkies, but the intensity actually pull it back, and then you didn't know that you are losing details in one of the channels. So turn on highlight alert, turn on histogram, RGB. And when you look at an image on your LCD, what you are looking at in this histogram is you want to look at where my red cross is looking at. You don't want the pixel. So what is a histogram first? So histogram is kind of like a bin of like many bins. So for intensity that is completely black from 0 to 5 intensity, then you put it into a bin and count how many black pixels are. And then if it's brighter, maybe from 10 to 20, like all the pixels within that range, they calculate how many and put it in this bin. Maybe there is 10 of those. And then when there is a lot of pixels that is around the 200 range, then you see a much higher peak on those range. So histogram really is telling you how the images look like in the bright area and the dark area. And you don't want the bright area to be way too high because, as I told you, you cannot recover the details afterwards. But then you don't want to be too low, and I will explain to you why not. You don't want to be too safe. That's what I want to say. You want to live dangerously, which is what I do. And sometimes I even have a little bit of blinkies too, and I say, are you crazy? But according to Charles, which makes sense too, is Charles Glasser, is when you look at the LCD, it's a JPEG conversion of the raw file. So raw file is, I don't know what, 12-bit, and JPEG is 8-bit. So actually sometimes the picture, the raw file actually captures something that the JPEG thought is already oversaturated. So if you want to maximize all your details and stuff, you want to actually push a little bit, but I don't advise you to do that. It's just that as I told you, I'm obsessed. So sometimes I'll do that. So, and after all this mid-tone testing manual and all, you always want to take some test shots and look at the histogram to make sure that you don't have blinkies, right? So this is an example, very simple example of a short-eared owl flying, and you know that where's the mid-tone? The mid-tone is everywhere. So you just want to focus on a part of the grass in the background and then set the exposure to 0 and then adjust your exposure. As I told you, f7.1, 1600 of a second, ISO 400 or something. You just kind of fine tune a little bit so that it's perfectly exposed, but don't reduce the shutter speed too much. And then some friends told me that, why don't you just spot meter the bird, right? Look at the short-eared owl is kind of mid-tone too, right? But as I told you, you never know how big the spot metering on the spot is. So what if you are just unlucky and then you focus right on the white surrounding of the face of the short-eared owl, and then the picture will be completely underexposed because they thought that this is actually gray, right? And then if you focus on the darker area, then you remember. And then when you track, doing autofocus tracking of the bird, you always are moving the lens up and down and all. You always miss something, right? So you don't want to do it. You want to have a very secure stuff. So anyways, so this is another picture. So this is a picture maybe an hour after the previous picture was taken. And as you see, and I'm slowly getting into this, it's about the storytelling. When the light will just get better and better when the sunset is closer and closer. And during those times, the light will drop. So what do? You have to keep using the spot meter to focus on the mid-tone from time to time, maybe every 10, 15 minutes. and then check to make sure that if the light drops, and if it drops, make sure to tune the light meter back into the zero position. So this is really what manual exposure is good at. So you only need to do it once every 15-20 minutes, and then you are good to go for the whole day, and you nail the exposure every single time. Yes, 840 millimeter. So so some people say that how do you photograph white bird or black bird, and or just pure white, pure black? It doesn't matter, because when we spot meter off the gray, the mid-tone, everything just fall into the scales perfectly. And so you don't need to worry about white and dark anymore, unless if it's a really bright day, then you might just lower the exposure to -1/3 just to be safe. But I usually set it right at the mid-tone, and you get everything. But if it's a black bird in a darker background, well, I don't want to go too much into details too, but then at that time you might actually increase the exposure a little bit, because there is really nothing that you will have exposure on, because everything is darker, right? So and I'll explain about it later too. I will explain to you soon too, but God, it's already 6:40. Do you guys have 3 hours? So this is another burst in flight. So you spot meter onto the green, right? Green is gray in the grayscale live, and same thing about the oh God, you guys have yeah, no. So this is a bear pouncing on a salmon, and you don't need to care about whether the bear is darker or the water splash is white. You just need to focus on. Okay, 3 hours is good. Okay. So you focus spot meter onto the mid-tone, the grass, and you're good to go. So you guys are all still with me, right? So by going through that, you already cover maybe 50% or 60% of what you do, because, well, I'm sorry, I'm in California. I'm in Southern California, so almost every day is sunny. So my life is almost a done deal after that. But what if the bird is flying from sunny to shadow? So some of you guys asked me that question in the emails. It is a very difficult question. So imagine if you're facing the bird, the sun is behind you, and then the bird suddenly fly into something that is covered by leaves, right? So I did actually ask a few of my friends, Melissa, Steve, and Loy, some other folks, and we kind of have a consensus. Well, I have my own opinion though. But what they do is you do a spot meter on the shadow area first, and then you do a spot meter on the bright area. You kind of know how many stops of light differences. So when the bird kind of transition from the sunny to the darker area, then you just change your shutter speed, aperture, ISO, whatever, to change it in real time. So somebody say, so why don't you just use automatic and then do that? Because automatic is like auto exposure is just bad, because when the background changes and everything changes, especially in a sunny day, it just messes up everything. I remember vividly when I first started bird in flight photography. Every time after a morning shoot or an evening shoot, I go home and I have to pray, because I was using AV aperture priority at that time, and I never freaking know when the picture will be too bright or too dark. I just have to say that, oh, please, camera, please do some magic for me. And you don't want to do that. You want to control. You want some good control. You want to communicate with your camera. Hey, this is a mid-tone. Please give me some good results, right? So, so Tracy asked Octo ISO. I'll go into that later too. So, so let's move on. So, the world is not that great. Well, it's still very pretty, but sometimes it doesn't have mid-tone, such as this picture taken in the winter Yellowstone some time ago. So what if there's no mid-tone? Then where do we point the camera at? And I actually learned it from my mentor, teacher, good friend, Charles Glassard on that. And if think about it, if you can spot meter on the mid-tone and tell the camera that this is gray color and please set it at 0, you can actually spot meter onto the white snow and tell the camera that, hey, this is a white color, right? And usually in the camera, in the metering, white, you can set it as +2 1/3 stop. So basically what you do is still manual mode, spot meter, focus, half press onto the snow, and then set it intentionally to +2 stop and 1/3. So in case you guys don't understand what I'm talking about, so this is a beautiful fox walking in the snow, and you spot meter onto the snow, the ground in front of this fox. And as you see, I actually put in +2 1/3. So you want your meter to always point to 2 1/3. And then everything is beautiful in Yellowstone, in Arctic Alaska, and everything. So every time you do it, you just focus on the snow. Here the same way, you focus on the snow +2 stops and 1/3 of a stop, and you're good to go. And then you say, what about bison? Tough, right? Look at the background, black and white. Oh God, how can I expose? Don't worry, just focus on the snow, set it as +2/3, and as you see in the histogram, you see a spike there. So anyways, I think I'm really going over time. God, sorry, and let me go faster then. So same way, bison, you set spot into the white and then do it, and then you're done. So how do you do pre-trip setting for snow? So when you jump out of the car or open your window, you just spot meter onto the snow and fix it into manual, and then you're good to go. So now let's get into another topic. So what really is the correct exposure? Some of my friends say that you nail the exposure. What the heck is correct? So it turned out that there is no correct exposure in a way. Metering +2 depend on the camera. Well, yes, the question is whether Nikon and Canon differs a little bit. So you have to really test. You take a test shot at +2 or +2 1/3 and see how the histogram is looking at, and then after that you adjust it. So there's no absolute here. So there's no correct exposure. So I'll give you an example. So I was photographing some great horned owls some years ago near where I work, on near a freeway, and what my friend told me is actually, you know what is crazy is that these great horned owls, after sunset, they actually would fly onto the ground and look for food, but there's no light. And so I said, well, at least we can go and enjoy that, right? Even my naked eyes couldn't even see them. It's so dark after the sun is set. But then you heard the calling, and all in the shot, the great horned owl fly onto the ground, and then you trying to get closer to them and all. So this one particular evening, this great horned owl flew down onto the ground and walking around to look for insects. And then I get closer to them. My eyes couldn't even see the owl. But and then if I do the exposure, the correct exposure that is that it should be dark, right? But no, I just intentionally overexpose everything else. And so I use manual focus too. I use hand holding a 500 millimeter manual focus on the owl, kind of blast a round of shots, because I couldn't really see when the eyes is going to be in focus. So I just keep pressing the shutter and trying to manually adjust it and all. And then I set it to like ISO 16,000 or something. And this is what you get. And so what you see is not what you get. At that scene, is complete darkness almost. But then if you overexpose it, you see something that is, O'Brien asked, why don't you use 18% scale, grayscale card? Because if you are using a 600 millimeter, you may have to put the gray card like 50 feet away near the animals, and then you can't really do much, and then you have to still pick it up, and then you will probably have already scared away the animals, right? So that might not be a very good idea. But for shorter lens, if you're using a 24-105, yeah, totally, you can do gray card. So as I watched this great horned owl, he started to walk around and he started to look for food. And I love that when you see this animal with big eyes and facial feature kind of almost look like human walking on 2 feet, and then you feel that this is an amazing world. So this is exactly what happened in front of me in that. So is this the correct exposure? No. but then you can capture a lot of details on that. So this gets to the idea of what is exposed to the right. God. So I'm going really over time. So I'm shooting at 7:15. I guess I should try to finish it. But if you guys have to leave early, don't worry. I'll still send you that cheat sheet, even though I don't want you to leave. But anyways, so exposed to the right, what it means is that if we take pictures of some animals, some birds that is kind of black and dark, what we do in Photoshop and Lightroom is, I want to look at more details of the bird. So you go into the shadow and then you slide the shadow into the right, and then you see more shadow, right? But usually at the same time, you also induce a lot of noise in those areas. Then you think, how about if I intentionally overexpose the whole picture just in the beginning, so that this black doesn't look completely dark? It actually looks way overexposed. But then as long as the brighter part doesn't go overexposed, then we can always get an image that is overexposed. And then in Lightroom, we just slide the highlight, which is the brighter part, to the left, so that we darken the brighter part, but then the darker part still has all the details. And what is good about it is there's almost no noise in those regions. And then you can print the picture big, go to gallery, win your photo awards and all. And most of the time, if the picture is too noisy, then nobody is gonna like it. So exposed to the right has just completely disapproved all the things that I have taught you earlier. So what I mean is that you actually, when you, let me give one more example. So this little bear cub on the left, look at the exposure. It's actually correct exposure, right? Because this cub is actually pretty dark. But then you said, I want to see this fluffy fur and all. So you just overexpose it. Look at the picture on the right, right? But then you didn't really have any blinkies, because you see that there is still a nice drop at the highest point of the histogram. So there's no cutoff, so no blinkies. And what you do is in Lightroom and Photoshop, you just bring down the brighter area. And then you can get all the details. So you get the best of both worlds in exposed to the right. So, God, anyways, so let me just move on. So this is, so what it means is that when, getting back to the original exposure, when we do the mid-tone, grayscale mid-tone exposure to 0, now you don't do 0. You always do plus 1/3 of the exposure. So you actually intentionally increase the exposure by 1/3, so that all the darker area becomes darker, but the bright area is overexposed but not oversaturated. So you can still recover the details on that. So anyways, so now it gets to some of the biggest question you guys ask is octo ISO and all these kind of things. So now we talk about sunny day, right? Sunny 16 and all. You now are an expert. You can ask all your friends, what is sunny 16? And then nobody is gonna know, and you can teach them. But and then you handle the snow, right? And you know exposure to the right. But what about if it's an overcast day, and if the animal or the bird is getting in and out of the shadow? And in this case, for example, this kit fox, San Joaquin kit fox, is in the shadow. So I'm not gonna answer the questions here, but so I'll keep it to the end. So some of my friends say that, if it's overcast and all, you don't want to have catastrophic error. So if you do manual, sometimes if the light changes and all, if you forgot to do another test shot, you mess up, right? But for auto aperture priority, basically, and then what it means, what I'm trying to say is you use evaluative metering or matrix metering for Nikon users. You do evaluative metering, aperture priority. What that means is it look into a weighted sum of the region near your focus point and do some fancy calculation, but it actually looks at almost the whole picture, and then try to match it into the histogram, and then you plus 1/3. So essentially you are trying to overexpose the picture no matter what. So this is a very safe method in terms of overcast day, because there's not much contrast and everything. Everything is kind of mild and soft. So this kind of auto exposure is good. So I have been using aperture priority and evaluative metering plus 1/3, which is written by many famous photographer books actually. So AV plus 1/3. And so this time I went, Barrett was there too. I went with Barrett, my good friend Donald, Mary, and Melissa Guru, many of you guys know. So we were in Yellowstone not chasing, but trying to keep up with this bobcat in the snow. And it was 7,000 feet or something, and I was pretty weak, and I lost one snow boot and everything. So I was trying to just keep up with the bobcat. Who cares about all the setting, right? AV plus 1/3 is done deal, right? So at that moment, we all stopped because we saw the bobcat was walking on a log near the river, and the log extends right into the middle of the river. And we look at the bobcat, and then at the edge of the log, it suddenly crouched down. And guess what she's trying to do? She's trying to jump, right? And who doesn't want a bobcat jumping in mid-air picture, right? So I set everything up with the AV plus 1/3. I keep on checking everything was okay earlier. And then the bobcat jumps, and then I shot like 5 shots in the whole jumping sequence. And then I look into the LCD screen, everything was great. And then I was smiling at Melissa and said, we nailed it, right? This is good. Bobcat once a lifetime in mid-air jumping picture, right? So during that night, I was sharing my room with my friend Donald, and then I looked into the picture in 100% zoom, and I almost had a heart attack because... So this is the picture I got from the LCD. From a fast look, this is the bobcat jumping on the famous Madison River, right? It's like the dream shot of many of my friends, and me particular. And then when I zoom in, look at that. So what happened is that the picture is not sharp, it's blurred, because why the heck did I have 500 of a second for a freaking jumping bobcat? I have no idea. I was at 2,000 or 3,200 of a second the whole time. So guess what? Right before the bobcat jump, the light just dropped 2 stops. So instead of 2,000 of a second, I suddenly got 500 of a second. And right after the bobcat jump, the light come back again, and everything was normal. So basically, it's just meant to be that I have to fail this shot. So this is the problem of AV plus 1/3. And then some friends said, so if you don't do AV, and how about shutter priority? I know some of my friends like Barrett is a proponent for shutter priority. I have to maybe talk to him on some more details. So what it means is that it's essentially the same as aperture priority. It's all using the auto adjustment of the camera. But what you do is you set the shutter speed and then fix the ISO, or you can set a high ISO, set a limit of the highest ISO, and then let the camera do its thing. But think about it: if you fix your shutter speed and suddenly the light drops, and if the f-stop is already at the lowest number, then what does it do? It may underexpose, right? And how do you solve that issue? I still don't know. There must be some method, but still don't know how to do it. So one of my good friends, Roy, one time told me that, hey, Tin Man, you got to check this Octo ISO out. And I never use Octo stuff. I'm a manual guy. And he said, no. So what you do is you set your shutter speed, you set your aperture, you set Auto ISO. And right now, a lot of the newer models of Canon, I don't know about the Nikon people, that you can set the exposure compensation too. So what it means is that, think about it. Now my shutter speed is fixed, my aperture is fixed, and my auto ISO, my ISO will change whatever it wants as long as I have the right exposure. And think about the camera I use, the 1DX Mark II, super powerful, right? When you go to ISO 8000, there's no noise. So I don't really care about what ISO I use. All I want is the freaking good shutter speed to freeze the bobcat when the God give me another chance, which he has never given me back that chance. But anyways, so manual exposure auto ISO and plus 1/3 seems to be a very good way to handle a lot of the most of the situation. Except, so there's only one exception for auto ISO and manual that it doesn't work, which is when is in overcast day, the animal is coming in and out of shadow and all of a sudden, if the sun bursts through this cloud, and then turn out that, well, I'll explain to you in one example. So first of all, I was photographing these short-eared owls in Seattle, and it was overcast, right? So I said, okay, overcast day, auto ISO. So I was shooting and shooting and shooting, and out of nowhere, the sun got through the sky and the cloud, and all of a sudden, the whole place was lit by sunlight. And then suddenly the bird get into a dark background. And because of that, the whole picture was overexposed. And boom, like a great shot that is supposed to be a very dark background with the picture. And then I got this thing that I cannot recover the details, right? And I never learned from my experience. As you know, I'm pretty dumb on that. So the other time I was photographing the bobcat in also kind of an overcast day, and again this thing happens. The sun bursts through the cloud, and then it seems like all the wild animals, when the sun bursts through the cloud, they like to go to a dark background. So this is what happens. So this bobcat kitten, one of the best pose that I ever had for him, looking at me, very relaxed pose, 4 feet all separated, like nice limb, no overlap, got to a dark background. Boom, all the highlight is white highlight is overblown, and I couldn't recover it. So next time, just remind yourself that when you do this auto ISO manual, always look for the darker background. And when that happens, always change your exposure compensation to -1 or at least -2/3. And this is the only kryptonite about that. And you said, why don't you just use manual and expose to the mid-tone? But again, the animal is moving in and out of shadows, and it's just very different. And you just for things like for beautiful animals like bobcat and all, they move very quickly. It's very difficult to even keep track of it. So it's very different from birds in flight. Birds in flight, you stand in one place and then you shoot the whole day. But for animals, you actually have to walk and follow them. And to follow them, and then you have to still do spot metering and then fix the exposure plus 1/3 and all. It's a lot of work. And during those times, you already forgot the composition and express the self-expression and all. So yeah, you don't want to do that. So that's it. No, that's not it yet. But to summarize it, so I taught you in each scenario. Now it's actually not too complicated. It's only sunny day, snowy day, and overcast day. And then I all teach you in each scenario what should be the pre-trip setting. For sunny day, you do the sunny 16 rule. For snowy day, you jump out, you point at the snow and do the manual. And for auto ISO for overcast day, you don't really need to do any pre-trip setting because it's going to be good, right? So imagine if you see a wolverine, right, and you grab the camera, you don't have time to do the spot metering on the tree next to it when the snow is dripping on the snout of the wolverine, right? So you want to grab the camera and click and wish for the best. So those times, then the auto ISO manual is one of the best, or AV and TV if your camera doesn't have that. So we cover all of this, but let's not forget what the title of the talk is. The title of the talk is how to master exposure metering to help storytelling in wildlife photography. So I talk about storytelling, right? So I have to quote one of the favorite quote that a lot of you already know that I love the book by Robert McKee called Story. And he said that story equals mood plus emotion. And if you have a pen, you should write it down. Story equals mood plus emotion, and think about it. So you all want your photos to tell a story, right? We all want that, just to express our emotion and all, but you want the story. So what does it mean by story equals mood plus emotion? And how does it apply to wildlife photography? So just think of a moment, a guy proposing to a girl. If the guy proposed to a girl at a dumpster, which smells really bad, and there's some rats running out, and then some garbage was exposing it, there's no mood, but there's emotion. The guy the girl is in love. Well, maybe not after that, but then there's no mood in it. So what is a good mood? A good mood means that if you want to propose, you may want to go to the top of the mountain in the sunset light, right? And then everything changes, and then the girl will say yes, and then there's a story there, right? Otherwise, the story will not happen. So for wildlife photography, it's also the same. Our goal as a photographer is to capture the emotion, which is, I may probably give another webinar in the future about how to capture the moment, which is a lot about auto-focusing and all this composition and all. But for the mood like sunset in the mountain and all, that's where the exposure comes from. Like this example of the Alaskan Arctic, the polar bear cub suddenly woke up when the mother and the sibling were sleeping in the golden frozen sea ice in the background with the highlight illuminating them. And then suddenly he gave something like a smile in there. So the emotion is the smile. All the highlights and like turning the ice into golden is the mood. And then you have a story there. So how do you tell your story after you learn all this exposure? So let's do a trip together, a random trip together now. So what do you do? If you want to take pictures for a place, do you just wake up at 9 o'clock and have a breakfast until 11:30 and go? No, you have to, in the previous night, you have to check your alarm clock, set your alarm clock, and then check the weather report of the place and check what is the sunrise time, what is the sunset time, is it a sunny day or an overcast day? And then you remember, you print a cheat sheet that I'm going to give you, and then you look at, overcast, what I should do. And then you refer to those things. And then also check like if there's wind or no, because sometimes the animals land based on the wind direction, or sometimes they don't come out if there's wind, which is what I learned from Seattle this time. So, and then what time do you go? Of course, you go in some wee hours, like 4 a.m. or something, when it's all dark, because you want to get to a place when it's still dark to prepare and all, because you don't shoot only in the beautiful light after sunrise or before sunset. Actually, there's a lot of magical moment before. And after I share with you some of these techniques, you will become very powerful. So in pre-dawn, you go to a place. What do? Pre-dawn is kind of like overcast, right? So manual auto ISO. And pre-dawn is kind of a little bit in this darker side. So you actually can do 2/3 of the EVA. As I told you that I love to live dangerously. So I don't do 1/3. 1/3 is for the weak. And you do 2/3 plus to maximize the details. Sometimes you get burned, but when you get a good picture, it's totally worth it, right? So you do this setting. And this is a picture I took in the Falkland Islands in the first day of January 1st in 2016. Actually, I was with my dad and my mom had a fever and was resting in the hotel room. But so colors that you don't see in the daytime, you can capture them. So on that. But one precaution is the ISO can be pretty high on that. So that's why I always recommend my friends to buy expensive cameras and lenses. Is totally worth it. So this is another picture of pre-dawn light. So pre-dawn, sometimes you get this reddish orange color, and in the low lights, all these owls' pupils will dilate, so they look a lot cuter in those cases. But for this picture though, I was using, I guess, 50th of a second or something, very low shutter speed. So I had to pray. But sometimes you gamble and you win. Sometimes you don't. But when you win, then you win big. Sometimes you get some pictures that doesn't look real in this. It's almost another world, another kind of creatures, right? So, and then the sun rise above the horizon, right? And what do? You set it to manual. Even the ISO, you also set it to manual. And then you do you turn the everything into a grayscale in front of you and find the midtone, spot meter them, and do +1/3 on spot metering. That's the sunny day. So this is an example of the sunny day. You spot meter onto the background. and then you plus 1/3, and you wait for the moment you find a nice background with no distraction. Well, there's a little bit in the bottom, but I shouldn't mention to it, otherwise you guys would have never saw it. But as I told you, I'm obsessive, so you wait for that moment and you click the shutter. You don't even need to worry about the exposure once you do the mid-tone. And white background doesn't matter now, right? Because you spot meter onto the mid-tone, and white background, dark background, everything doesn't matter at all. You get perfect exposure every time. And this is another example of a wild barn owl flying towards me up in mid central California with some of my good friends there. A very good time, but never happened in the last 4 years now. And also in Alaska, I haven't told you guys, I actually am famous for getting dead beaver pictures. And if you go to the lodge in Alaska, everybody will know that. So I encounter a very special event when a bear killed a beaver and ate it. And right there, he was running away from some of the other bears chasing them. And white background doesn't matter. You just do the manual exposure, and everything is just perfect. And especially in those kind of special situations, nobody expected something like this would happen, because I've been photographing in Alaska for quite a few years, and I've only seen them eat the everything else except a beaver, right? So when that happens, how do you expect? You don't, and then you just grab your camera and shoot, just like when you see a wolverine, right? So, and then sometimes when the sun hide behind the cloud and the animal get in and out of the shadow, which mostly applies to land animals. And what you do, manual auto ISO plus 1/3. And sometimes you get lucky when you see the what I call the Bob Kitten here. And all these pictures you can see in my website too. So, and then this is the same Bob Kitten. Well, actually, is it the sibling? Yeah, the sibling. Yes, and same thing. Look at that. The bobcat is actually in the shadow. The background is actually bright, but it doesn't matter because you're using auto ISO. So in those moments, you capture that. So after sunset, what do? You switch to manual and auto ISO and plus 2/3. And sometimes you get some very interesting stuff. This is during the snowy owl eruption in 2011. So it was after sunset. The sky turned pink, and got this shot. And then you see this nice pink background, very peaceful, when the cub was sleeping on the mother's shoulder, very soft shoulder, and I was on a boat, and I love this kind of color. Yeah. I was very happy that some of the friends who took pictures with me in the snowy owls and also the polar bears were here too. So you see these crazy colors in after sunset. So by taking a picture like that, you actually improve the mood, right? Think about it. If you take a picture of a snowy owl in the blue background, it's not as good as a pink background in terms of the mysterious feeling of the mood and all. So by staying all day and doing this, what I learned, it actually helps you.